Hey everyone, this is Mike,
Hey, and this is Josh, and
and
we
we are
are
real
real
dead.
dead.
Oh,
And
you
today,
really screwed that up there, Josh.
yeah. Well, I'm looking. I feel like I'm sideways or something here.
You are, Josh.
Hi, I'm
Yeah,
Brandon. I'm alive.
yeah,
Real
So,
alive.
Josh, you want to introduce our guest,
yeah. This
Brandon,
is
and talk about his expertise?
this is Brandon. I've known him for I don't even know how long. What, 20 years, dude? Probably.
Yeah, something like that. I would say
Yeah.
since I was 16. I'm 37 now. If you don't mind me
I'm
asking, how old are you?
40. I just
Okay,
turned 40.
so I've known you since you were about 19, 20.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah, because I remember you at the warehouse
Yep,
place. I
good
remember
old,
that.
good old youth group days.
Yep. So, but yeah, and Brandon is here. He is a horror fan. That's why we have him on here. Wait, up here. And he also deals in conventions. He's been to a
Yep.
lot of conventions. He has a lot of experience with that. And he's just overall just a horror fan. He's met a lot of people in horror movies. And so, yeah, that's what we're going to be talking about tonight.
Awesome. All
Okay,
Yeah,
right.
I think,
Brandon, you want to say anything about yourself before we get started with some questions and some conversation?
Uh, see, I'm a strapping 175 pounds, 6'5". No, I,
Hey,
man, my two passions, pop culture wise, I'm going to say it right now because you're probably going to hear a lot of my stories intertwine, are horror films, but also Power Rangers. And I know that sounds silly probably to some, but hey, if you go to a Comic Con these days, I feel like you're never going to not see a Power Ranger there. So, yeah. So I've been going to Comic Con. My first Comic Con was actually Motor City Comic Con 2012. I went with a couple of buddies of mine from Office Max. I worked from Office Max or for Office Max from '07 to '09. So I built a lot of friendships there and found a lot of the geekdom there, and kind of learned a lot about myself and got a lot of confidence in myself and these things like that. So yeah, so that's kind of that was my first convention as a fan. So
okay.
so yeah, we're
So
we're newbies. I think Josh and I have told this a million times, but we've both been horror movie fans for a long time of the genre. And I worked at a movie theater for my high school years, and actually into to almost I was in my mid 20s, late 20s, so almost 10 years in the movie theater
it's awesome.
business. So got to see a bunch of free horror movies,
Probably
and
got a lot of cool posters for your room too, eh?
I wish I did, but I don't. Believe it or not, I do recall my manager one time when I was young had the original Star Wars poster on the back of his door. I'll never forget that, and why nobody stole it, I don't know why. But
Sure.
when we finally told him how much it was worth back then in the late '80s, he rolled it up, took it home. So good for him. Um, but yeah, we just recently went to a horror convention. I've been to a couple. Josh went to his first one, and then he was telling me that you guys were friends and you had joined the Real Dead. Here's a shameless plug: the Real Dead Facebook community, and you've been posting some awesome stuff in there. So we do appreciate your commitment to that and some of the media that you're grabbing and collectibles that you're posting. Those are some really cool things.
Yeah, man. Yeah, it's funny because I not to get too deep, but my father was maybe I shouldn't talk about that. Let's cut that part. I've always had a habit for collecting. Like, I always kind of feel like I'm a shopaholic. Some people have alcoholism in their family. I probably have shopaholism, whatever. So I'm always feeling like the need to collect and everything. I especially kind of as an adult, getting that adult money. Wanting to collect action figures. Obviously, back here, Josh, you got a bunch of stuff back there. It looks awesome. So for me, I had gotten to a point where I was like, man, I've kind of collected all I can collect with like the Power Ranger side of things. And I'm like, well, I really want to kind of build my horror collection. And my wife and I both love horror movies. She kind of bats an eye at the Power Ranger stuff, meaning like she's just kind of like, whatever, that's your thing. But horror movies, we enjoy it together. And so I'm like, well,
That's
you know what,
nice.
I kind of want to collect horror stuff and you know, kind of build this behind me here. And it still drives her nuts, but you know, it's kind of something where she doesn't hate it as much as Power Rangers, I would say. But so anyway, I literally 2 years ago, around this time actually, I was sitting at a convention in Davenport, Iowa, and there was a horror vendor there, and he had like a bunch of these DVDs for like 3 for 10, you know, whatever. And I'm like, huh. Well, I've always been a really appreciated physical media. It's one thing to watch a movie, but it's something to like have the case and you know be able to kind of look at the credits and you know like sometimes they'll have the inserts in them or you know the special features and stuff. So I'm like, why don't I just like kind of start doing this gradually? And you know, I think at that point I had like five. I had like three of the Final Destinations, Chucky, and something else, and Hatchet. I had those like in my hand from that vendor, and so I was like, man, maybe this is something I'll just kind of start and do like a little bit here and there. If I go to a thrift store and I find them like $3, $5, well, with me, it's never just subtle. It's that was avalanche. You know what I mean? So it got to NECA's starting to do more figures, and cool, like there's Trick or Treat Studios doing these masks, you know, from the movies and the, you know, at one point I was doing the Funko Pops, like, you know, whatever. I had like, you know, I had a bunch of Power Rangers and Funko Pops and stuff that I was into, and then I sold them all, kept the horror ones, and eventually I had kind of gotten rid of the horror ones, but I kept my Purge Pops because I was like, well, I love the Purge, and I wanted to, you know, hold on to those, especially, and we'll get into this, but the girl from the election year, her name's Brittany Mirabile. She plays the Candy Girl. She's a good friend of mine, so I wanted to find that one, but then I ended up finding a set of them at Motor City Nightmare, so I was like, yeah, I'm going to grab them. So
That's
yeah.
cool.
Yeah.
So I guess we start with some of these questions. By Josh, how'd you pull the dog out of your butt there, Josh?
Just
She was behind me. She can't. Yeah, she can't.
You
You
just
know,
kind of pull her out of nowhere. It was like boom, like dog.
she's sitting behind me in the chair.
Yeah. So I have 6 cats, so they might jump around the chair.
Oh wow!
Yeah. So you might see a couple of them make a special appearance.
So, in talking to Josh, and you kind of mentioned a little bit, you know, with conventions. Now you actually represent some clients, right, for Power Ranger and horror, or
Yep.
vice versa. Can you tell us? Can you tell us how you got into that? Number one, because that's kind of a question we had asked Sean Clark: is how do you get into something like that? But then number two, can you tell? I mean, if you're able to, can you tell us some of the clients that you've represented in the past, or that you currently represent, or just how you got into that? That's really a cool story, I'm sure, because I've never even thought of that. I thought it's really cool.
Yeah. So I mean, a lot of it, you know, it's one of those things where it sometimes, you know, you never know with people's journeys. Like they've been all over, they've built rapport with people. For me, I am a graphic designer. That is my career. I have a degree in it. It's my full-time day job. I still am a graphic designer. I have been for the last 22 years of my life. So basically what happened is I started going to these conventions, right? I started meeting these Power Rangers. I started, you know, kind of getting their autographs and photos and such. So with that, you know, the creative juices flowing, I started thinking, I was like, all right, well, I was going to Target and a lot, and you see like these like vanity shirts, like what Breaking Bad, they, you know, at Target you could have gotten like those, what is it, Los Palos Hermanos or whatever the restaurant is that Gus manages or owns or whatever. That's his front for that business. So I'd see things like that, or like Star Laboratories for like the Flash. You'd see like that shirt in stores, like Hot Topic. So for me, I had this idea. So Walter Jones, the original Black Power Ranger, on the show Power Rangers, he had his own martial arts kind of school. It's called Hip Hop Keto. It was like a mix between dancing and martial arts. So I came up with this design, and it was like a kind of like a yin yang with like a dancer and a fighter on one side, and like a boombox in the middle. And I was like, well, all right. The worst thing someone can say to you is no, right? So I went to Walter at one of those cons, and I said, hey man, so I got this idea for a shirt for you to take to cons and sell. And he's like, well, okay. And so he gave me his phone number, which I was like, holy crap, I got a Power Rangers phone number. And he's like, give me a call in a couple days and I'm home, and we'll talk about it. Show me your mock-up. Let me know what you think. You know, show me what you're thinking. So with any advice I would give to somebody is always come to the table prepared. You don't want to just come spitball. Hey, I got this idea. Like have something ready. That's kind of like my first bit of advice. So with that, we had that meeting and I emailed him the image. Loved it. He sold that shirt for, I want to say maybe a year or a year and a half at cons. And so he's like, I really like what you did there and you seem pretty professional. Like, what would you think about like doing some of my like social media advertisements? I'm going out doing starting to do more of these shows. A lot of these cons are starting, up their first shows, and why not design my promos for me? I was like, yeah, why not? That sounds like a really cool opportunity. So I did that. And then at that time, Austin St. John, the original Red Ranger, was kind of coming back from the military. He was a combat medic over in Kuwait. And Walter and David Yost had been telling him about Blue Ranger, had been telling him about all these cons, like, hey man, we're doing really well out on the road. You should come out with us. And so I had gotten hooked up with his agency and, with Austin and his publicist people, and started doing flyers for him. And then David Yost, the Blue Ranger, needed them, and Karen Ashley, the second Yellow Ranger, and Catherine Sutherland, the second Pink Ranger. And it kind of just snowballed into like I'm building relationships everywhere. I go to Lexington Comic-Con for like the second time, and I meet Michael Bioni. He is the promoter for Ranger Stop Orlando. And I know I'm talking a lot about Power Rangers right now, but it gets to the horror stuff. So I kind of started learning how to do websites and everything. I was working for Yellow Pages. I built websites for them for 3 years. So I offered to build him a new website, started doing a lot of his graphics. So I started getting into the conventions, like helping them build websites. So we got to probably about, this was 2000 and early 2019. We got to a point where, Mikey and I were starting to, like, it was his show, but he knows that I was big into Power Rangers. And he said, hey man, how can I improve my show? What can we do differently, or what can we do better? Power Rangers in itself moved production. It was on for 30 years. It just wrapped completely. They're going to reboot the whole thing next year. It just wrapped its 30th season. In season 11, it moved its production, everything over to New Zealand. Cheaper, more beautiful, area, whatever. It was, a lot of it was, they were able to match it with the Japanese Sentai footage. So they just felt like it was a better move. It was Disney's idea when Saban sold it to Disney. So a lot of the actors from season 11 to season 30 live over or down in New Zealand, Australia. They had a couple from the UK in season 15. So a lot of the fans hadn't ever met these people. And so I said, well, look, there's a lot of fans that are willing to give and like be a part of this. Why don't we start this sponsorship program to where we kind of chip in $100 to $300 to get these flights going for like a few of these guests, and we can make a show with rarer guests, So I'm already kind of thinking more ideas, and my con world stuff is evolving, if you will. And so he went with it. And not only did we started with 4 guests. We ended up that year bringing 8 international guests. It was pretty awesome.
Oh, wow. That's good.
Yeah. One of those guests' names was John Toohey. Now, John Toohey is he after Power Rangers, he did 2 seasons of Power Rangers. He played Doggy Kruger, Commander Kruger in season 13 of Power Rangers SPD, and he was in both the dog suit. He's a big dog. It's kind of weird, but he was the voice actor and the suit actor. That's never happened before. And then the season after that, he played just a regular Ranger. He they didn't show his face the previous one, so they could use him again. After that, he went on to do bigger pictures like The Hobbit: Battle of Five Armies. He was the main org guy. He did Fast and Furious Presents Hobbs and Shaw. He played one of Dwayne Johnson's brothers when he went back to Hawaii to talk to his family. He played Alpha. Josh will resonate with this. He played one of the Wild Samoans in Young Rock, the story about Dwayne Johnson's life. He played Alpha. Yep. So he and I got to be really close. He is the type of person that doesn't like to text. He likes to video chat. So we became really close friends. We were talking like 2 to 3 times a week. And after that show, he said, you know what, man, you are really good at this. Like, you should try your luck at being a booking agent. And I was like, well, never thought about doing that before, but I've worked under a lot of agents and I've seen how things work. And, you send emails, make phone calls, whatever. Again, I've already built a rapport with so many conventions and actors. Why not? Boom, COVID hits in February. Nobody's working, and it gets pretty rough. So a couple of the Rangers were doing Jason David Frank, Steve Cardenas, Tommy, who was the Ranger who sadly died in 2022, and then Steve Cardenas, who was the second Red Ranger, and Jason Font, who was season 9 Red Ranger. They were all doing like comic book stores, right? Because they could go to a comic book store. They couldn't have these big, huge events because it was COVID. We couldn't do anything, like masks everywhere, and it just wasn't any fun. But for the Rangers to do comic book stores, they didn't have to have all these big crowds. They could just have people wait outside, 6 feet apart, wear a mask, whatever, take a mask off for a photo, and that's it. Hold your breath. So for me, I started reaching out to other comic book stores and different actors that were friends of mine that I had built rapport with. Plus, the kids that were on the season currently were just coming off of their season, and they wanted to do signings, but there wasn't any cons for them to go to. So I got a hold of them on Instagram, Rory, Travis, and Jazz Bedwally of Beast Morphers. So I kind of put together like my own little, I was working with like probably maybe 6 to 8 Power Rangers, just getting them comic book shops and signings. And then once conventions started opening back up, boom, I had rapport for all these other shows and conventions, and I already kind of had a formula down. So in that kind of downtime, I was able to kind of teach myself just kind of see how it works. And I've always been like really good with spelling and language arts and reading and such. So, I already had the professional thing going. And so, John, one of the things he told me, he said, one of the reasons why I really think you'd be good at this was how you approached me. You weren't just like, hey, John Toohey, Doggy Kruger, come over to America. Yay. No, I wrote him like a kind of a bulleted, kind of like a 5-paragraph essay, if you will. I mean, that's kind of the structure of sending a professional email. And he said, you really approached me with professionalism, and you didn't try to, kind of gloat or like, what am I looking for?
Make the percentage so high or something, try to make a lot of money off of him.
Well, that too, but also, I was pretty genuine with him, but also, I wasn't trying to flex. That's what I was looking for. I wasn't trying to be like, hey, look at this and that. He did a little bit. He's like, because I was telling him like about this Power Ranger con. He's like, I was in The Hobbit, right? I was in Star Wars, right? Like all these other projects he's done. And I'm like, yeah, man, that's awesome. But, but then he kind of started thinking about it. Well, Power Rangers is my first thing. I should give back to the fans, this and that. So anyway, all that to say, so on the horror side of things, I started doing volunteer work just at other cons around town, like Days of the Dead, Horror Hound, Motor City Nightmare, like all these other shows that were around. And I'm like, man, I would I don't want to compete with any horror agents because I know that they're my friends. I made friends with some of them, and I'm like, well, why don't I just try to go for some talent that they haven't really gotten the opportunity to do shows, or maybe they don't know about it or whatever. So I reached out to Brittany Mirabile. Like I said, she played she was the Kiss Me mask here. She was the one in the election year. I want my effing candy bar. That girl that she was the store clerk guy. So I messaged her on Twitter, kind of sent her the same message structure, gave her, I said, hey, I'd love to talk to you more about this. Here's my phone number, this and that. She called me that night. I was like, oh, wow, cool. So we had a really long talk, and I've gotten her quite a few cons. The other Purge person I have, he was in the second season. I don't know if you've ever seen the TV show. TV show is great if you haven't seen it.
No, I've never seen it.
So season 1 is just like another Purge night, but season 2 is really cool because it's world building. It kind of shows you what what this country looks like between 2 Purge nights, like in that year. So you see 4 characters kind of like how they're living life. You get a girl who works for the government. You got a guy who's being like stalked by his neighbors. You got another who's the other one? I can't remember the other one. But then there's a guy named Ben who was almost raped and killed on Purge night by like another dude, and he was able to kind of get out of it in self-defense, and he got that lust for the kill. So the whole year you see him kind of struggling, and he kills like a random guy in like a field or like a farm. And, he's like trying to get through. He's going through like one of those disaster rooms or something, where you beat the crap out of stuff, and that's not working.
Oh, yeah.
He tries to kill wild animals to try to feed that bloodlust. It doesn't help. So then he kills a guy on the farm. So anyway, this guy, I thought he was a great actor, and I loved him. And I was like, man, and in the universe, he's the one that, because the Purge TV series takes place after the first Purge, the fourth movie, the prequel. And so in the Purge universe, he is the one that makes the God mask over here popular. He's called the Campus Killer. So that I was like, all right, so he's on the poster. He's got kind of a Funko Pop. I mean, it's still Lakeith Stanfield, but I mean, he could sign a God Pop right here, where I don't know where my hands are, right there. Yeah, so I mean, like, all right, so I contacted him and he was down to do it. And so that was kind of my ticket into horror stuff. And then there's some other horror actors that aren't exclusive that are like, yeah, if you give me something, sure, so like Bob, I know, like, like one of the Leatherfaces and one of the Jasons, like, I'll help them out sometimes, very rarely, but yeah, so that's kind of my story long of how I got into cons. And I've been to probably over 200 cons, maybe even 300 by this point.
Wow.
Yeah. So it's a lot, like literally, and especially with the way the cons are going now, I don't know if you guys realize, there are 4 huge Comic-Cons in the Midwest area, all within 200 miles of each other, 300 miles. Horror Round, Days of the Dead, Indiana Comic-Con, and Epic Con are all the same weekend. I was going to do 3 of them. I think I might have to do 2. So
wow, it's crazy. Yeah. So saying that, do you think that it's kind of reaching its apex as like popularity, or do you think it could grow even further and be bigger?
It's hard because I almost feel like, and this isn't me putting down any like celebrity or convention or anything. I don't want it to sound like that, but it's almost getting to the point where it's too much.
Sure.
And the reason why I say that is because, like I said, especially with this coming weekend, you've got 2 horror cons, a horror-ish con, and then Indiana Comic-Con, who has a lot of horror people at that one. You're dividing vendors. A lot of these guys, so you go to cons, you see a lot of these booths, that's their bread and butter. And it's hard because it's like, all right, well, shoot, do I go to that one? Or like, do I go to Days of the Dead? Do I go to Horror Hound? Do I go to Indiana Comic-Con where there's like all these people? What do I do? Like, you know what I mean? Like, where am I going to make the most? It's almost a gamble these days. Same thing with celebrities and agents and guarantees and all that stuff. Like, it's like, all right, well, they are probably fishing at, like the Screencast, for example, or like Terrifier, right. Those guys, like, you're starting to see them bleed into more like the pop culture show. So it's like, ooh, which one do we pick? Which one's going to be better? Which one's been around longer? Which one's going to bring in the most guests? It's one of those things. So a lot of these things are becoming normal, becoming popular, and a lot of these shows are also duplicating shows. So like they'll have a spring show and a fall show, or a summer show and a winter show. And it's like, ooh, I would never want to like talk down on someone expanding. Like, by all means, me being a small business owner, yeah, I want to expand. I want to get more clients. I want to do this. So I understand the want to expand, to make more money, to have more fun. But at the same time, it's like, ooh, you're like looking at a weekend that's like a bunch of other shows. Heck, even this past weekend, there was like AwesomeCon, Lexington, Collecticon, like all these big cons all on the same weekend. Same thing's going to happen in a couple weeks with dude, Michigan alone. There's Astronomicon. I saw even on a comment thread, there's Grand Rapids Comic-Con Spring Edition, Spring Fling, and then Astronomicon, all like 125 miles from each other, those two. I even saw in a comment thread, they're like, who's coming to our show? And then the other one was like, sorry, I'm going to the other one. Like, that's kind of a. So you ask, is it reaching its peak or apex? Yeah, we're at the point where I feel like it's like probably gonna bust. I don't know. I don't know what that looks like. In the next like 2 years even. But
right,
it's things where we'll see.
Well, and then like it's at the point too where a lot of these celebrities have gone round and round, right? So it's like they're not probably getting the crowd. I mean, I'll just say it, at Mad Monster Atlanta, the first con I ever went to, Kane Hodder had no line the whole time we were there, did he, Mike?
No, I was actually going to bring that up because I went to see him in August in Charlotte, North Carolina, or Concord at Mad Monsters, and he was charging about $20 less for an autograph. His line was 2-3 hours long. People lined up down a long hallway. And then when we went to see him in Atlanta, just several months later, 4 hours from Charlotte, North Carolina, 3.5 hours, he was over there by himself.
Yeah, he had like nobody.
I could not believe it.
And that's a little difficult too, because I mean, if you think about it, how many conventions are in Atlanta? I mean, or very close. I mean, people drive. You know, for me, I'll drive if I'm just as an attendee. If it's somebody I really want to meet, I'll go 5. It used to be 7 to 9 hours. I can't do it anymore. I'm too old for that. So it's probably more like 6 hours is my limit. But if you think about the Atlanta area, it's Mike, you'll know this. I mean, how long does it take you to get to Atlanta?
For here, it was 5 hours. 5 hours
So
for me to drive.
that's a drive, dude. Like, I mean, think about it. Atlanta has now, they're doing 2 Days of the Dead shows there. They've got Mad Monster. Mad Monster, one of them, who is it? One of them is expanding into Charleston. You know, I mean, like that area has just been very saturated with some of the same people. Now, it depends, because it's like there's people like, let's throw it out there. So like Austin St. John or Jason David Frank. Let's Power Rangers. Let's say Kane Hodder and Robert England. Okay. You know, a lot of these guys, they get multiple items for merchandise, right? Power Rangers, you know, they get like their Lightning figures, their Legacy figures. You know, I think Jason David Frank, I think, had 7 Lightning figures. You know, Kane Hodder's got 4 different masks. So I mean, you'll get your repeat customers. You know,
Right.
I can only. Like, I've done it before. Like, oh, I can only afford like this much. So
Mike's done it.
Yeah, I mean, I've done it. You know what I mean? Like,
that's like Peter Criss. I wanted Peter. I'm a big Kiss fan, and I grew up in the '70s. And Peter Criss was down in Atlanta, and but he was charging a really high price. Plus, he had you because of he's had problems with cancer in the past. He's he's in remission now, I believe. But he wanted you to wear a mask.
Yeah.
And pay $120 to come see him, and you wouldn't really get to see you. So at that time, I was like, I can buy his autograph off his website for $80 and not $120. I don't know. It's just me. But if I had to do over again, I would have had my picture taken in front of his drum set with him behind me for my son. Like everything I do in the horror of collecting is really for me to hand over to my son. That's something we have in common. He's 13 now, and we have every Friday night is Friday night horror night. We watch a movie. So some of these things that I'm showing him as these 70s, 80s, 90s horror movies, when he gets to go to these horror cons, he don't realize just how lucky he is. I mean, back when I was young like that didn't happen. You didn't go to horror cons back then. I didn't feel like it anyway.
Yeah. Well, I'm kind of doing the same thing. You know, like a lot of my Power Ranger stuff is not personalized. Actually, all of it is not, because let's face it, I know I'm diabetic. I'm probably not going to live as long as my wife. So, she might need help with funeral costs. So she could sell my Power Ranger autograph collection for probably a good $25,000. So
wow.
If you average it out to the signatures being anywhere from $40, $50 a signature, I get for Power Rangers. So in my own personal collection, I get an individual item signed and a group, like 8x10 that a buddy of mine have designed every season for. So, and I have them sign it in their Power Ranger color. So it's like, it's one of those things where it's like I'm making an investment in my future for my family, whether if it's just her or if we do end up having a child. So, we don't know. But I mean, I'm not trying to sit here and be, and I'm not saying anything against these people, but I'm not trying to be like an eBay flipper. That's not what I'm doing. So,
right.
I know people bake their bread and butter doing that, but
right. So when I met, I think I told you this, but when I met Skeet Ulrich, I was like, oh, just sign your name or whatever. Because, Matthew Lillard signed his name on it, on this NECA figure. So I didn't want him to personalize. I just wanted their names on it. That's it. I didn't want to personalize because Matthew Lillard didn't. So even though I told him my name was Josh, he was supposed to wrote my name, but he just didn't, because I don't know, how it is can be at those conventions. So I didn't want Skeet to do it. But then Skeet asked what I did, and, I'm just honest. I was like, oh, I sell online. And he looked at me like, and I was like, no, this is mine. I'm not selling this. I told him, I said, I am not selling this, dude. So, because, I could flip that for a bunch of money, more than what I paid, but I'm not going to. It's mine, I'm not getting rid of that. Like, this means something to me. So,
yeah.
So Brandon, who is your favorite, and that may be hard to say, maybe I shouldn't say favorite. Who is your favorite horror actor you've met personally that you really connected with? And you're like, man, this was really cool. They were really, because like I mean, we know they're getting paid, and sometimes they'll spend extra time with you. But I mean, you've been to a lot of horror conventions, and I've heard in the past, as expensive as Robert England is, I've heard he's really personable and spends time with you. I don't really know because I don't have his autograph. I've never met him, but like, who are some that you really have enjoyed over the years meeting and talking to, and if you got any cool stories with that, that'd be awesome as well.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, I can't obviously I can't go without continually saying my friend Brittany. Brittany's amazing. Like we went to Bomb Spaghetti together, like hanging out like downtown Detroit. We've done a lot together. So she's a great friend, just on the personal level. As a fan, going out there and actually like meeting people. So here, I'll give you a Robert England story. So I was waiting in line to meet Robert, and it was getting like to the end of the day. It was a Sunday, and he was getting ready to leave. And he was like, "All right, I'm gonna do one more. I'm gonna do one last autograph and photo, and it's gonna be free. I pick you," and it was me. I'm like, "Oh, sweet!" So that's just kind of my short Robert England story. So
wow, that's awesome.
That's
I know.
really
I'm like, cool. Why not? So here's my favorite story to tell. So Tobin Bell,
Mike.
Jigsaw. Let me tell you. Let me tell you about my Jigsaw story. So Tobin, he's sitting down, and it's reminiscent of Saw 2 because he has that thing where he does this. He does like that. He's looking down. He's like, that or whatever. Like does the look up, right? So I get to the table, and I've got my print ready. Which actually I do need to tell you about my horror autographs too. But anyway, so you get to the table. It's my turn, and I'm like, "Hey, how you doing?" Whatever. And you're like, "Oh, good. Not really saying much." I'm like, he's signing his name at the bottom or whatever. I'm like, "Could you write? Would you mind writing? I want to play a game." And he looks at me. He's like, "I don't do that." He's like, "That's not what I do. I won't." And so he starts to sign his name, and he's whatever. And then he does that Saw 2 look. He's like, and then he's like, I'm thinking he's upset. I'm like, crap, I pissed this guy off. It's Jigsaw. I'm like, oh, I don't know. And then he gives me that evil Jigsaw look, and then he writes ... game over. And I was like, oh, and then he starts laughing. He was smiling, like he knew he was messing with me. He does that with the fans. He's awesome. Like, I don't know. And so like, we took our picture. It was great. And so that was probably the most memorable, awesome like story that I have. I've got plenty, but that's right off the bat, that's the one that I think of the most. So
I really would like to meet him and get his autograph for sure. Mike over here is not a huge fan of the Saw franchise, but I am, and I think Tobin Bell is awesome as Jigsaw.
So here's a fun story for you, Mike, with Saw. So Josh and I have a history. We have a friend in common, and we were always like, kind of like, did you go see that Saw with Aaron? I did. And like you were like, I think you saw like the most recent ones with him because I moved, but like I saw like Saw 2 through 5 or 6 or with him, I think, and then I think you were the final chapter on. But
I went with you two guys. Aaron invited me to go, and I actually went to my first Saw in the theater with you guys in like, I think it was like Saw. It was the one where the girl has to chop her arm off. Was that Saw 5 or 6?
Man, those ones bleed together. I don't know.
Well, it's one of those, but yeah. So I actually went and seen, I think, 2 in the theater with you guys. Okay. And then after that, you moved, so then me and him watched the other ones or whatever. So
yeah, that's funny. Yeah. Another good story I have, Brad Dourif, the voice of
Love it.
Oh, actually, yeah, I got a couple. So hang on. So so Brad Dourif, when I met him the first time, he didn't go like back behind the curtain he came in like around the line, and he stood and like talked to us for a minute. He talked to me specifically for a little bit. My wife just confirmed that was Saw 6, by the way, that she cuts her off.
Okay.
So Brad Dourif was really cool. He was really personal, like just came and talked. His daughter, Fiona. So I had met Fiona before. Now, have you guys ever met Fiona? Like, have you been to it?
No, I've never been to a con that has Brad Dourif or his daughter. So,
okay.
No.
So Fiona Dourif is awesome because you'll hear. Are you caught up with the Chucky series?
No.
Okay.
Mike isn't either.
So this isn't really too much of a spoiler, but in the Chucky series, they do flashbacks in the second season of Chucky and Tiffany Young. You actually find out that like Chucky and Tiffany knew each other, and she was actually involved in the night that Charles Lee Ray died and became the doll.
Really?
Yeah. So
Spoiler alert.
Wow.
it wasn't that big of a spoiler. But if you watch
No use in watching it now.
if you watch the show, when they do flashbacks of all of them, it's actually Fiona dressed like they've got her made up as her dad. She can talk exactly like Brad Dourif. And so it's really
Wow.
funny when you're at a con that she's at, you hear her laugh. It's Chucky, dude. It's Chucky laughing from across the room, and it is creepy.
Wow.
Hilarious at the same time. So this past fall, actually, I had met her before and gotten her autograph, but I started doing like my autograph prints a certain way. So like for a kill, like, okay, so there's the two images I base my my autograph prints off. I design all my stuff. So there's an image of Laurie Strode with Michael Myers behind her, like in her doorway. I don't know if you've seen that picture. And then Heather Langenkamp, she has that picture with Freddie, like she's almost like holding him. Like
Yeah. Yep. That's the
she's
one you got, isn't it, Mike?
Yeah, I think it is.
Yeah, so I've kind of based my artwork based off for like Victims and Final Girl. I do it kind of based on that. So like I'll put the victim or the final girl or whatever in front of like the killer, and I'll have the killer kind of off the corner. I should have brought some out to show you. But so I was like, I had started doing that, and I had met Fiona Dourif before I had done that. So I wanted to get her autograph again. And so I went and got in her line this past fall at Scarefest, and she asks you 4 questions. Do you watch Chucky? Like, what got you into horror movies? Like, which movie? And then she asks you, what scares you in real life? So this is getting kind of funny. So I am deathly afraid of like deep water oceans. I'm thalassophobic. So just the idea of the unknown and the fact that they've said they know more about our solar system than our own ocean creeps me the hell out. And so it's like you see these. Oh, dude, I can watch any of these movies all day, but 47 meters down, I'm like this, dude. I'm like the whole time. My wife was laughing at me like hardcore. And so I told her, I said, look, even the littlest things, like that part in Finding Nemo, even when you see Dory go fishy, 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 and it turns into a big ass whale. I'm like, no, fuck that. No way. Sorry. Can I swear on this?
Yeah.
All
Yeah,
right, sorry.
Josh does all the time.
Okay. So yeah. So I was like, fuck, little things like that. Even in Happy Feet, man, like when he's running away from the orcas, like, yeah, no way, dude. You hear like, and you hear stuff on the news now about how an orca ate a shark. No, like I keep it away from me. So I told her the story. She starts dying laughing. And so on my autograph, she put to Brandon, fuck Finding Nemo, Fiona Dourif. Like it was so cool. And then she does like
that.
yeah. So then she does like 4 photos of you. She'll do like the American Gothic prom pose and then like a regular, whatever. But she is one that I highly recommend if you guys ever go to a con.
She sounds awesome. She sounds awesome.
She's great. She's amazing.